Okay, I say we get started. So we may have some people trickling in over the next couple minutes, but that is just fine. Good afternoon, everyone. A big welcome from the K-12 Insight team. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar. We're so excited to have you all here with us. I want to start with a quick point of logistics. We will have the chat and the Q&A feature open for the entire webinar. So please feel welcome to add your questions and comments there at any point. We'll be watching for those. We'll be happy to answer and respond. And with that, I will pass it over to Krista to get us started. Enjoy the discussion.
Hello and welcome. First off, I just want to thank you for being here right now, especially with back to school season in officially kicking off, and most of you are already in full swing. I just can only imagine the millions of things you could be doing right now. And I just really appreciate you choosing to spend this hour with us. The second thing, and even more important, is just to thank you for serving in our school systems and for the important work that you contribute every day. Now, I'm not going to flatter myself. I know most of you are only tuning in because you want to hear about the key findings that we got to see a little bit earlier than you did today for the survey that we did this spring. It's not only created a lot of buzz, but it's also generated the national report that we're going to be sharing with you today on parent-school trust and engagement. But before we go there, I'd like to just do one introduction other than myself. If I start with me, I'm Krista Coleman. I'm the Chief Customer Officer here at K-12 Insight. I've spent most of my career in educational technology, predominantly representing the client success side of the business. And I'll tell you, I witnessed firsthand the things we're going to be talking about today. As I work with clients, especially, in my role as a liaison for them, my job is to ensure they get what they need to better serve their community. So this survey couldn't have had better timing, right? And also just couldn't have helped us better prep for what we're going to be facing these upcoming school years, not just year, right? Joining me is my colleague and somebody far more important, and the reason we even have this report is Dr. Jennifer Koysen. Dr. Koysen heads our research team here at K-12 Insight. She brings with her just a vast amount of experience when it comes to designing, implementing, and analyzing data for just a massive amount of research projects that we do every year, to include the one you're going to see today. When she's not doing and conducting and designing and architecting and analyzing all of this data, she's doing interviews and focus groups. And so, this project was right up her alley. But before we kick things off, I would be remiss. A friend of our business and now part of our business, former superintendent, reminded us of, remember where we are today, right? We're coming off of COVID-19, not a COVID-19 year, but COVID-19 years. We have to actually say that in plural, and we're still in it, right? When is the coming off? We're all waiting for that to happen. There's new mandates happening from state to state, right, across our country. We're facing, of course, severe staff shortages. School violence is, of course, rocking our nation, and so many students are still struggling with learning loss. So this period's been nothing but normal. So we can expect satisfaction, trust, and parent responses aren't going to be normal either, right, for our school districts. And so a lot of the data we've collected in the past couple of years just looks a little different, including this data. Like for some of you, you're going to be like, I expected that, right? That's what these parents and families said, and others will be a little surprised. So I just wanted to preface the discussion by just putting that out there, that remember the times we're living in, and we are definitely not tone deaf to that. Before we jump into some of our findings, though, we're going to have Dr. Koysen come off of mute and just walk you through what our goals were when we set out to do this project, and then how we actually ran this project. Dr. Koysen?
Thank you, Krista, and thank you for everyone for joining us today. So our survey was designed by PhD level researchers, and we aim to explore the relationship between district communication, district customer service, parent satisfaction, and parent trust in their school district. More specifically, we aim to determine if there's a relationship between how satisfied parents are with the customer service they receive from their school district and their level of trust in the district, as well as if there's a relationship between the level of trust parents report having in their school district and how likely they would be to recommend their school district to a friend. The survey included questions that focused on parent feelings and perceptions on their experiences when they reached out to their school district with a need, as well as when they received communication from their district. We ran several cognitive interviews on the survey to ensure that it was going to be easily understood by a wide range of participants. And it was translated into several languages, including Arabic, Chinese, Filipino, Haitian, Hindi, Korean, Spanish, and Vietnamese. In the end, we ended up collecting 450 responses that we classified as valid, and these were collected via Facebook. We did use a method of convenient sampling, so we do not generalize these results to all parents who have a child attending a K-12 school district. And now what we're going to do is, now that you've got a little bit of background of the survey, I'm going to turn it back over to Krista, who's going to share with you some of the key findings from the survey and what those mean for you and your school district.
Thanks, Jenny. Before we dive right into the findings, I just want to take a moment to kind of put everything in context. I'm going to start by really talking about one thing that I want you, if you're here representing your school district, to think about as we go through this data in this presentation. One thing to know, top districts that retain their staff, students, and funding have one thing in common. What is it? I typically tell Isabella to let you off mute and let you shout something out, but I'm going to give you the answer just in essence of time. They deliver a superior customer experience. That's the difference. Before we dig further into that, so I want you to place that and leave that in your little bubble as we go through the rest of the presentation. I want to bring your attention to the screen on what our survey revealed. First, you'll see that our data revealed that there are so many ways that our parents are reaching out to us today, right? So many new channels of communication for parents to use to talk to us. And the other thing the findings showed is these parents have high expectations on the responses they receive, as they should, right? The other thing we found very clear was there was a positive and statistically significant correlation between parents' overall satisfaction with customer service and the trust that they have in the school district. This ultimately will lead to the likelihood of whether or not they'd actually recommend their district to a friend or a neighbor. We'll also talk about that a little bit more in about 2 seconds. But stick with me, because I don't want to take you through all this data and you're like, okay, Krista, you just sat with us in the last 30 to 40 minutes. Little hint, I'm going to try to get you out of here early. And you told us, how all these parents are communicating with us. You even told us how we can look at it and monitor it and measure it and all that good stuff. But what do we do now? What can I leave from this webinar and take back and implement in my district right now? So I'm going to leave you with 3 things. If you can just stick with me to the end, then I'm going to leave you with 3 key things that your district can start doing right now to improve the experience your customers are receiving. It's actually pretty amazing when you see the impact customer experience can have on school districts. Even though we don't typically put customer service, customer experience with public education, we think more of like a business term. How was your experience at that restaurant? How was the service at that hotel, right? But that recommendation piece we talked about, would this parent recommend their district to a friend or neighbor? That relates to something that we call a Net Promoter Score. And today I'm going to just give you a sneak peek into the way the way our current school districts are using it and the way we are supporting NPS. So just give me a minute, we'll get there. Before we go there, let's start by just looking at one of the first key takeaways from the actual survey. So let's jump into the data. First major finding has to do with communications. I'm sure none of you are surprised with this one, but the communications between parents and families in their district, 87% of parents said they reached out more than once. 44% said they reached out at least 6 times. I'm sure none of you have those 6-time reach out parents, right? But our reality is they do exist. There's a lot of reasons why parents are reaching out 6 times. A, they go to your website and they don't know who to reach out to, so they reach out to a ton of people and copy the same email across the board. Or if they're in our system, like if you are a customer of ours and you use Let's Talk, they will put a dialogue into the system and hope everybody who sees it, can answer. This is a lot of inbound inquiries, right? And when we see the percentages, it might not be as impactful, but when you look at it like this, think about you being a district that has 10,000 students, okay? This can easily mean for you 26,000 inbound inquiries in one school year, if not more. So this is a really big deal. If your district has roughly 10,000 students, this applies too. You could actually sit in the back of your numbers, but if you have 4K or 1,500 or 25,000, 100,000, some of our districts have 300,000, right? You can figure out your multiplier based on this method, and it's still a lot of inbound interactions, right? That's how many inquiries you're getting from your families each year. Which brings me to the next slide, which you are going to participate. You don't have to come off mute, but you are going to participate because we do want to hear from you. Long gone are the days of parents sending a note in a backpack and the teacher writing the note back and sending it back. That's gone, right? Our parents are wanting to get a hold of us now and they want answers now. So if you don't mind, if you could pop into this poll, just respond back. How are families communicating with your district? Give everybody just a few minutes. Isabella, can you share the poll results? Not surprising, right? Emails, 88% responded that emails are the way their district, your community reaches out to you. 88% tied with phone calls. Text messages. Oh, this is good. Text messaging is the new. We are dealing with younger and younger parents every day. And I'm going to tell you, my children who are now adults, they were raised, born, and they only know text messaging. Social media got a high of 69%, 28% said other. If you have time after, I'd like to hear some of the other. Well, this is what our survey found. Districts across the country are experiencing an uptick in inbound inquiries from new communication channels. So that other could play right into what we're talking about here. And with so many different communication channels, this uptick isn't surprising. I mean, think about it. We went from a world that wasn't so virtual. We flipped overnight. We tried. We did our best to flip to a virtual. We definitely became more of a digital world. And think about it. Everything became instant. You didn't walk to school anymore. You didn't get on the bus and go to school. Your parents didn't drive you. You went in your living room, you pushed a button and you were in your classroom. Everything became instant. So this uptick of, people being able to reach out and wanting to hear back right away, it's the sign of the times. But 70% of our inbound inquiries came from phone or email, right? Very similar to you guys. But we all know they're all coming into all of our school districts, but every district actually manages these inbound communications differently. For example, if we talk about emails, which got a pretty high rating with you all as well, Some of our school districts and some of the public school districts that were represented with the parents that were surveyed here, have a district website. You go in and there's cute little faces with great, I would say your back to school outfits on, and you've got your email right below, and you can click right in and push the email. Others have just kind of an inbox, right? And on the back end, we're getting the emails where they have to go. Others use something like Let's Talk, where there's just a button that allows us to get our communications. Whatever you use, however you use to manage those inbound messages, the goal is that whatever your management preference is, it allows you to meet the expectations of your families, which is quick response times. We talked a little bit about this digital world creating these immediate desires, this desire to get these immediate responses. And our data showed us just that, right? Parents have very high expectations for response times. As you can see in the graph here, 70% of parents expect a response within 1 day, 24 hours from the time they sent it. 26% even said that they would like the response to be the same day. I sent it to you this morning. I'd like to hear back from you by the end of the day, right? So the vast majority of parents not only are expecting to be able to get to you and find you quickly, they want answers just as fast. All right, take a breather. You guys also with me? Can't see you, so you could be answering your email and you could be doing a lot of other things, but pay attention to this. If you pay attention to nothing at all, this is one of the best parts. We've talked about how parents are reaching out to schools, right? We've also seen the data that shows they're expecting us to respond really fast. I mean, really fast, within a day. How do you feel? How did they feel, though, about the interactions that they did have? Regardless of whether you responded right away or not, was the interaction good? We surveyed these parents. We had a keen interest in not only of how the interaction was, but the types of interactions, and are they hearing back, right? In a time that they feel like is sufficient. Our survey replied that 36% said the responses were always courteous. So you think about this survey, 30% of the people said that the responses were courteous, which means you have where 60% of the people saying they didn't get a courteous response. Only 43 said they were timely. Well, that doesn't surprise us. We talked about this time and day we're living in. Finally, just 29% said responses were helpful. So can you imagine? You even worked to push your team to respond back, but they didn't think they were helpful or courteous. Satisfaction is still going to suffer. I mean, these survey participants are saying there's still a lot of room for improvement, and not only timeliness, but courteousness, helpfulness, and other customer service interactions need to be improved. When it came to the parents' feelings about the communication they received from the district, 26% of participants were either neutral or dissatisfied. We're going to talk about what this like neutral or passive, like these people in the middle can actually hurt you in the long run, right? Because it's very easy for them to sway the wrong way. 1 in 4 parents felt that there was either not enough or too much communication between the school and the student families. You guys got the whole Goldilocks thing going on, right? You do too hot or too cold, it's right in the middle. What is that? How do we know what that right amount is? Well, at the end of the day, we have to figure it out, and we have to have a way of measuring what's working. And this needs to improve because we need to ensure we're providing experiences that allow for a higher level of satisfaction from your district stakeholders. And why is that so important? Because of the concept I mentioned with those 3 cute little letters, the NPS acronym that stands for Net Promoter Score. Let's dig into that. NPS, or Net Promoter Score, is another thing that we actually measured in this survey. If you're not familiar with the term, it's usually associated with businesses in the past, right? It's a tool that a business uses to measure customer satisfaction. In education, though, we use NPS to measure stakeholder satisfaction. Well, you might say, Krista, who's my stakeholder, right? I have a lot of stakeholders, right? But you're right, it is. It's your staff, it's your students, it's your families, it's your community members, right? It's your board members. There's a lot of stakeholders. So we use NPS to measure the stakeholder satisfaction with their district to gauge how likely they were to recommend their district to a friend or neighbor or family member. This is pretty new to education. Most have not heard about it yet, but it's starting to be used in universities, and it's even trickled into K-12, even with some of our very own clients. So it's coming. So I'm glad you're here, because a little sneak peek of what's coming is always helpful, and we can help you prepare for that. If we broke it down, when we talk about a net promoter score, people usually will fall into one of these three categories: promoters, passives, or detractors. Okay, so think of your promoters, they're your cheerleaders. They're the ones that say, look, you don't need to go to this school or that school or find another option. The option right here in our neighborhood is not only really, really good, I think you'll be really happy with the move we made here. The passives, here nor there. My kids like these things about it. I don't love these things about it. You know, unless, you know, something goes wrong with our kids, we'll probably keep them right where they are. The detractors are the ones that are say, oh, whatever you do, do not go to our local school, or do not enroll your kids in our local school district. In fact, I'm trying to find options right now. Just as a reminder, when we're finding a true or running a true NPS and finding true promoters, we're calculating the NPS by requiring the responders to answer one question: how likely are you to recommend this district to a friend or a colleague or a neighbor or a family member? Now, this is how it works. That question goes out to your community. The respondents are asked to rank their likelihood on a scale of 0 to 10. Those who answer 9 or 10, they're considered your promoters all day. I'd recommend you send your kids here. In fact, send every kid you know here. Those who respond about 7 to 8, 7 or 8, I'd recommend this district to our friend or neighbor. They're considered passively satisfied, right? Those are our passives. Finally, anyone who answers 6 or below, forget about it, right? Not only are they complaining every day to you, they're telling everybody else options that are out there to work against you in most cases. The Net Promoter Score is calculated at the end by subtracting the percentage of detractors from the percentage of promoters. So our 20% of detractors by our 47% of promoters gave us a score of 27. So stay with me here. Keep in mind that the scale goes from a -100 to a +100. So you have a point of reference, just so you can be like, okay, Krista, was 27 a good score or not? In universities or in higher education, a good NPS is considered anything above a 32, right? We know these parents are all not from one school district. But if you were to run a survey like this at your school district and you were able to land a score, you'd be able to kind of see where you land. And obviously we all want to fall in we really want the high promoter, right, category, because that means we're doing something really right? And our stakeholders are happy. So now that we've covered the NPS, I want to just take a moment to talk you through like the power of those passives in your district, right? Of course, we all want promoters, but I just want you to know that the power of the passives have a lot of power. You see the two little tiny curves on the outside of our bell curve? These are either your promoters, right, or your detractors. So think about it. These are the people that have really entrenched opinions, good or bad. The passives in the middle, right? They make up the majority of your district stakeholders, and passives can go either way based on one interaction. In fact, you can do 2 to 3 things really well for a family And they might finally go over to the promoter side, like, hey, I'm no longer kind of indecisive about that. I actually think this is the right place for the kids in our community. One bad interaction, though, could flip them into the detractor group. So in our survey, we found a direct correlation between those positive communications, that customer satisfaction, and the response that they got in their NPS. So essentially, better the communications, better the overall satisfaction for stakeholders, which means they're more likely to recommend your district, right, to their family and friends. This is all bringing us back to our original statement, right? When I first shared with you, let's think about, what does that high-performing district look like when it comes to customer service? That district that does retain lots of staff and students, and they also are keeping a lot of their funding. They provide a superior customer experience. This goes hand in hand. Providing a customer experience, a positive or definitely a superior customer experience, can be what moves your passives to promoters. Now, the one thing I've heard, and you might have even said I could put this in the chat for later to ask, but I might answer this question for you right now, is that there are many districts that come to me and before they become clients of K-12 Insight, and they really challenge me on, Krista, there's really no way to measure customer satisfaction. It's easy for you to say, like, let's just improve customer service. Hey, I can get a bunch of people to start answering people really, really fast. We can do all that, and I can make sure they're courteous, and we can get them some training to make sure that the experience is good. But then you're taking me all the way to the NPS, right? How do I measure how I'm doing? How do I even measure where we're at? How do I know? I know we're in trouble, but how do I know how bad of trouble we're in, right? Or maybe it's not as bad as I thought. Well, in most cases, you need a tool, right? And we do recommend that. Here at K-12 Insights, our customers, they use a tool called Let's Talk. If you are a K-12 Insight customer on this call, you very much know what I'm talking about. For those of you who don't have a tool like this or don't have Let's Talk, let me just kind of explain how it works. Let's Talk allows your district to take all those channels of communication and basically streamline it through your district website. So we layer right in, right? And the actual tool gives you a way to measure if you're improving, and you actually can see things like your response times, how fast by department everybody's responding. You can also see through a CX score how you're being rated by your community based on every interaction. They had their interaction, they got the answer. It's just like Uber. Think about it. As soon as you get out of the car, you can rate the driver. Well, as soon as you finish your interaction at the district, you can say how your experience was. The districts here that we're highlighting just for this slide, I just want you to know, I'll use Let's Talk to measure their customer experience. So we do have access to this type of data. What we're seeing in all of our clients is that there is a correlation for sure, and you can see it too on the 3 that I put up just to give you 3 different examples. There's a correlation between their response time and what they're calling the CX score. So really clear, CX score is going to be different than NPS. If I was talking to you in the assessment world, I would tell you that you would give all these preliminary assessments, right, to see how they do on the end of year state testing, right? This is a way that you can monitor, measure, and gauge how we're doing so that if you should launch an NPS survey, you'd have some understanding of how your community is feeling about their customer experience and their interactions with your district. Make sense? If not, I will be on for questions at the very end of this. Okay? So you can see here in the chart, the response times, all were different, right? The more they went down, the higher the CX score goes up. So let's talk about District 1 on the left there. There's 52,000 students in this district. This district has pretty slow response times, and I'm going to tell you why. They had a huge emphasis on only answer emergency dialogues really quickly, and we kind of put that in the notes. When they started seeing the data, though, and Let's Talk, that they were doing really well on emergency comments, questions, concerns, but there were other questions they could have easily answered a lot faster than 4.9 days. They've taken this information and they've created a way to create processes to improve that. Their 4.9 days, Unfortunately, their lower CX score or rating were coming from people who didn't have emergencies, but just wanted to know tomorrow is school closed, right? Nobody got back to them in time. District 2 was a little different. They have a high emphasis on all dialogues. They got a ton of dialogues. They have 70,000 students. I just did a walkthrough of their district, and all over there are giant screens that says we've reached 100,000 dialogues. They've gotten those since 2019. So there's a lot of inbound inquiries, right? They have an average CX score of 8.5 out of 10. Their response time is getting quicker, right, than the first one. They're at 3.5 days. And they too are figuring out, how do we beat 3.5 days? Our last district's a little bit different. Our last district, their entire emphasis on, look, not only are we going to give people answers, we're going to do it with accuracy. And if we don't have the answer, we're going to tell them that really fast and then get back to them. But they saw the results of basically having a 9.4. They're answering on an average of 1.2 days. So that's just over a day before you're getting your answers back to you. And that's been their entire focus since they launched, and it's paying off. So if you think about it, the district that has the 9.4, if they were to run an NPS, they can pretty much, gamble that, hey, we probably get a pretty good referral or reference when it comes to referring a neighbor, a friend, or family member to our school district. So now that we know what parents are expecting, the question is like, how do we deliver this, right? Like you're saying, okay, this is really easy, but with our staff shortages and everything that's going on right now, Krista, you don't have to tell me, I had 2 superintendents driving school buses last year, not the first year of the pandemic. I've seen a whole office staff empty out at lunch to go help serve in the lunchroom or deliver food to students. I have chief communications officers who are teaching kindergarten. So I know this is a really, really tough time. So how can you deliver, right? I promised you 3 things that you could start working on right now that could at least improve the experience your customers were having at your school district, that could set you up for when you're ready for this version of an NPS. So you'd know if you had referenceable customers. One of the things I want to share with you right away is the communications access. We've seen such a difference when the access is increased across school districts, especially from an equitable lens. We are challenged with so many things, from language barriers. We even have some of our districts who are dealing with low literacy. They haven't learned a lot about, they're not savvy on the computer. And not only that, we have adults who are still having issues with reading, right? We've got disabilities that we can't account, we're trying to account for our school districts for every single one of them. And this is just breaking communication barriers. Some of these issues are blocking families from crucial information that we're trying to share out. And how can they recommend you to someone else when they're struggling to get to themselves? So ensuring that every stakeholder is able to find the answers they need, it's critical. Okay. So whether you choose a tool or you choose to do this, on your own, make sure it's easy and accessible for everyone to be able to communicate with you and have a 2-way dialogue with you. That's true communications and engagement. Number 2, customer experience. Just work on improving your everyday interactions, right? There's so many ways to do that. If you have staff that's new and in the past have not been on the front line, get them some help. Customer service training is probably the biggest rage and biggest hit in our company right now, just because we're putting people on the front line who've never had to do that before. So we have to make sure that we're doing things to improve the quality of the support we're giving. And we also have to make sure that the timeliness of the way we respond is a high priority this year, and you will see a difference. Last but not least, measure, right? And act on the NPS. Like, find a way to measure your customer satisfaction. Don't let what's not available, because it all is available, stop you, okay? The ideal way to do this is, if you use the NPS method, right? the way they designed it is that they would survey 5% of your population every month, right? Just to get a sense and a trend on how things are going. That's obviously difficult to do. And that is not what I'm telling you to do today, because for you to go back and tell your administrators and your colleagues that they look at you like you had 3 eyes, right? This is something new to education. So we still need to also socialize it, even with our immediate staff. So instead, you just might want to think about building it into some of the routines you already have. Some options could be add a version of NPS to your annual school climate survey. Would you recommend this? After you did the survey, would you recommend this to your neighbor, your friend, your family member? You could include an always on button with an NPS survey on your district website. We have districts that are requesting that from K-12 Insight right now. You could add an NPS survey linked in your standard email. So, hi, Krista Coleman, thank you so much for reaching out to our school district. Unfortunately, your student cannot reserve a spot in carpool for your limousine. I'm sorry to disappoint you with that, but anything else we can do to make your drop off easier, let us know. A little link, how'd I do on my response, right? Would you recommend our school district to someone else? So you have options that are already embedded into what you're doing today that you could add a version of the NPS. But if you add these 3 things, you're already going to be on your way to delivering superior customer service, right? Superior customer service is on to naturally improve your NPS scores. Got it? Could you read it back to me in 36 minutes? No, and you don't have to. But this wraps up really our presentation. And as I promised, I was gonna give you some time back, but I don't wanna cut this too soon before we give you a chance to ask questions, if you'd like. I'm gonna ask Dr. Poison to come off of mute and join me. But if you have anything that you wanna ask us just about the presentation, our findings, why we did this, what we're interested in, what's next? We'll even talk about that in my final slide, but we invite you to use the chat box or the QA feature, and you can do that now.
So Krista, we did have one question come in already. We're on board with the idea of quicker response times. The question is, how do you handle not making teachers and staff feel more pressure to respond quickly?
That is such a good question. So I just want you to know your teachers are responding pretty quickly already, just because not only did I have children go through the public school system, I also have all the people that are working on my team today who've got small kids. I think the teachers are one of your better responders. I think we're getting a lot of heat and is at the district level right now, just because there's a couple of issues. It's really hard to find the right person to talk to. So I shoot an email out to 12 people, right? And then either 6 of those 12 start responding, or somebody thinks somebody else is responding. And so a lot of times it's really not the staff's fault that there's some delays. However, if you do have a system, if you are a current Let's Talk client, this is pretty obvious. The answer would be you have a way to streamline that, right? You push a button and it automatically has a workflow that sends it to the right person in your district. If you do not have a tool like Let's Talk, I would say it is a good pressure. I know pressure builds diamonds. It's really hard to even get these staff to show up. But I tell you, we're going to answer these questions anyway. So encouraging our staff to answer sooner than later, it really does pay dividends to your school district. The other thing is sometimes the people that are getting the questions don't know the answers. So it's a lot of pressure, like answer this fast, but I don't even know the answer. This isn't even my department, right? Which is why we do recommend a tool, because that kind of alleviates that type of pressure. But you ultimately need to make sure that if your front line isn't equipped to be able to answer things in a timely manner, because sometimes they don't know that answer, I would say updating those FAQs on your website and making sure that some of these answers can be reached even in your, I don't think there's ever any out of school hours for you guys. I gotta be sensitive about that too. But at least on off hours when parents are home, and most parents have questions at 9 o'clock at night, right? When nobody is in your building. So I would say, yes, they are going to feel a little pressure, but I'm going to tell you, the district that I showed you, I won't name the name, that has that high CX score. They said this isn't an option. And they actually are getting less dialogues because parents are getting answers. Not only that, because they got the answers out quickly, they didn't have parents going on Facebook deciding their own answers and their own narratives. So there's lots of benefits to putting a little pressure on your colleagues. I mean, send them some cupcakes and buy them lunch, but definitely make that a high priority.
And I think another thing that I've seen that has helped with that, I know personally, my son's teacher did it at the beginning of the school year, is setting that expectation as a teacher at the beginning of the school year to say, you know, we know throughout the given day, random times of night, you're going to have questions. Please allow me 2 to 3 days to get back to you. And so at least that way, in terms of looking at customer service, the client or the customer already knows what to expect. So then they know that at least within 2 to 3 days, they can expect to hear back from the teacher.
Such a good point, Jenny. Even with a tool, each of those districts you saw set a level of expectation. Thank you for reaching out to us. Our expectation that we're setting with you is that we'll get back to you within 3 business days. But then people really start counting the clock after 3 business days. That does give you a little bit of breathing room, but just know this. I think at the principal levels where I'm seeing the benefit the most, because the teachers are actually very good at this. But the principal level, if they don't answer it fast, it goes to the district level. The district level then has the responsibility to get the answer back, which the district level needs to go back to the principal to find out what happened up to the principal level. So now you can see why this delay is trickling right up the wrong way, but this can stop a lot of that by a principal just being encouraged to get back to that parent sooner. Any other questions?
I have one more. This is referencing the results we shared about the different communications channels from parents. Dr. Koyson, this might be a question for you. In the survey, was there a list provided of those channels for parents to choose from, or was it a blank entry box for them to enter their own channels?
Both. So we had a list of the most commonly used methods in which parents could both reach out to the district or the district would send communication to parents. And there also was an other box so that if for some reason it wasn't in the list, they could select other.
There is a question in there that also says, where can we find this actual survey and findings? So that person, Deneen Mosley, just set us up for our next slide.
Oh, before we go to the next slide, that we have one more question come in. That
Oh, okay.
Answer for everyone. The question is, how can my district start to ensure quick response times?
So ensuring it, that's interesting. You know, I think you have to measure it first. That's what I would recommend, is that you find a way to measure how they're doing currently, because you may be surprised. We did a pretty large urban district, and we kind of level set, right, by department, which districts were answering the fastest in our system. The superintendent was really surprised. Like, there were a few that he thought, wow, I thought they would be the slower and they would be the faster. And so I think we need to level set how they're doing, right? How fast they are. But then what we've been doing is working with the departments that aren't responding as fast and going in and giving a little extra support. And we also dug in and found out there were reasons they didn't answer faster than others. It was a lot harder for them to get some answers than the other departments. So it really made sense to the district, and they gave them not only some professional development, but they also gave them some help. So I would say measure first so you know what you're dealing with, but then go back in and then, you know, by department, when you think about like an enterprise level at a school, right? There's so many departments represented, but really see the ones that are suffering, just like we do with our teachers, right? We have some that are just getting through 3rd grade with no problem, and others are seeing test scores that are just so different, right? We actually help and give each other support. We tag teach, we tag team, and then we also have our teachers go in and do a little PD. I would say you do the exact same thing with your customer service. All right, so for Deneen, who set us up, and I did not pay her, and she's gonna help to get us quickly back to our busy days. But absolutely, yes. You don't have to worry about where you're going to get this, because if you signed up and registered and you are on this webinar, you're going to receive a copy of not only this recording, but you're also going to get a copy of the entire report. Okay. So I hope that answers everybody's questions, that every single one of you that is registered will have a copy of the recording and a copy of the report. The next thing I want you to keep an eye out is our work doesn't stop here, right? We're trying to figure out how to increase this NPS number for all public schools. We're trying to create more promoters than detractors. That is our goal. Not only, I mean, that's where our focus to help each one of our customers each year, and also bring really important information back to people like you who may or may not be our customers, but are very interested in this information and want to do the things that it's going to take to improve that customer experience so they can see higher NPS scores. So in the future, our research team is going to focus on what influences NPS and what does NPS influence, right? Our goal is to figure this out so we can help people like you, right? And the people who are working so hard at your district to make this better so that you can compete. This is a tough time to have to compete. This, you know, the K-12 marketplace feels very different today than it did 3 years ago. So we're going to be doing the research to validate these connections between NPS, engagement, school choice, enrollment, and more. So stay tuned. Our new report will be published by the end of this year. If you're registered for this webinar, you don't have to worry. You'll get an invite. And we'll keep you updated on our findings, our newest report, and we'll invite you back out to hear again what the findings were. If you have people who you're like, oh, such a bummer, I wish they could have joined this today, add them to the list, right? So that we can get them on the next webinar, or at least get them signed up so they can receive a copy of this report and the findings. We'd be happy to help. All right, you did it. We made it in 46 minutes. Again, we thank you so much for your time. And I know we couldn't actually talk because there's a lot of you, but we really do appreciate you joining us today, and we look forward to helping you in the future. You don't have to be a K-12 Insight customer to be able to reach out to myself or Dr. Koyson for anything that you need. This really is about, you know, we are on the winning and keeping public schools strong team. So we are on your team. And we are on the team to save our public schools. And so if you need anything, you don't need to be a K-12 Insight customer to reach out to us. My email is on the screen. It'll also be when we send you this recorded program, you'll have this whole deck and it'll show it. You'll also see Dr. Koyson. You can also go to k12insight.com to our website and contact us at any given time, and we're here to help you. Thank you again for joining.